Patch 11.24 is bringing a large amount of balance changes, and I'll go through all of those, then give a prediction on how this will affect the meta, and then share my tier list prediction for the next patch, so that you know what to play on Wednesday. First, we have system changes, and they're making trait augments more attractive to pick up. There is a ton of text here, but the short version is that almost every heart now gives you a unit as well. For example, with Chemtech, you get a Zac for free, and with Arcanists, you get a Twisted Fate for free. Also with trait Souls, you now get +2 emblems instead of just +2 of the trait. This is huge for comps such as Snipers and Arcanists, as you now have more units that can benefit from the trait. Like I said, they're reworking and buffing almost all of them, so pause the video if you want to see how every single one got changed, but the TLDR is that all trait augments, meaning hearts, emblems, and souls, got buffed in general. Next up we have traits. Challenger is getting a nerf at almost all levels. This hits both Yone and Samaria, which were really strong with the right augments. This should make the Academy Yone version more attractive next patch. Chemtech is getting reworked. Now it always lasts 8 seconds, and instead scales the attack speed and health regeneration. Note that 5 Chemtech is unchanged, but this is all around a buff to Chemtech at both 3, 7, and 9. This is a great change, as 7 and 9 Chemtech was just a bait previously. Clockwork is getting buffed at 4 and 6, which is nice to see, as I never played that unless I got +1 or 2 Clockwork augments for it. Innovator is getting nerfed at 5 and 7. This in general just gives the comp less damage, which is fine. It is still a stall comp, so Morello will be even more important for Innovators next patch. The Blademaster Mutant trait is getting a buff. This is a little scary to see, as Reroll Kog'Maw loved this synergy, and it was a strong comp last patch. Academy is getting small buffs at 4, 6, and 8. With a nerf to Challengers, we will probably shift back to seeing Academy Yone over Challenger Yone. Arcanist is getting a small nerf at 4 and a large buff at 8. This is fine since they are nerfing so many other meta comps. Arcanist should get a preemptive nerf to not make it OP next patch. Bruiser 6 gets a small buff. This won't change anything, as you only run it in Chemtech and Trundle if you get a +1 or 2 augment for it. Imperial is getting buffed at 5. This makes the non-Tyrants in Imperial 5 get the same damage increase as the Tyrant in Imperial 3. The only issue with Imperial 5 is that you have to run Scion, which can be hard to argue for since he takes up 2 slots, and without Colossus, he might even be too squishy to be your main tank. Syndicate is getting buffed at 3 and 5, but nerfed at 7. This makes the comp stronger early and mid-game, which is nice. Once you hit a Kali 2-star late game, you should still be in a great spot to win the game, or at least top 2. Twin shots are getting buffed at 4 and 6. This is a welcome change as you would never play this unless you got augments for it. Moving on to 1 costs, Garen is getting a damage nerf. I suppose this is preemptive to not make Garen reroll too strong next patch. He will still be worth 3-starring in reroll Kog'Maw comp. Camille gets a small mana nerf. I barely ran Camille early game last patch, so I probably won't do that next patch either. Darius gets a tiny nerf. Now he will heal a little less. This is a nice change as he did heal to full in a lot of cases when surrounded. Kassadin gets nerfed at 3-star, but buffed at 1-star. This is a nice change as it makes mutants stronger in the early game, which is where a lot of their power is lacking right now. Moving on to 2 costs, Katarina is getting nerfed. This is a welcome change as she dominated last patch. The nerfs aren't huge, but a big part of why this comp was so strong was Echo, and he is getting nerfed. Trundle is also getting nerfed. This hits his scaling into the fight mostly. He already did decent damage, the issue is just increasing his attack speed. The biggest nerf to Trundle is yet again the Echo nerf, as he was the enabler of this comp by buffing Trundle's attack speed. Blitzcrank is getting a nerf at 3-star. This is fine as he won't one-shot backline carries anymore with AP items. Kog'Maw is getting buffed at 1 and 2-star, but nerfed at 3-star. This is fine as the Kog'Maw reroll comp was really strong once you hit the 3-stars, but it struggled a lot on the way there. This should make him a more attractive item carrier in the early and mid game for units like Jhin or Urgot, which is nice. Zyra is getting a small buff. Now her spell will go off faster, resulting in less people walking out of her CC range. Moving on to 3 costs, Shaco is getting a large buff. He was probably the worst unit on the last patch, so seeing this is nice. This might make Shaco 3-star carry good again. Vex is getting a small nerf to her shield, but a giant nerf to the damage she deals. This is a great change as the unkillable Vex 3-star was frustrating to deal with last patch. Cho'Gath gets a decent HP buff, which is nice as mutants were almost completely absent from the last patch. Echo gets a much deserved nerf. Now he will give less attack speed to his team. This change is great as he was the enabler of both Trundle and Katarina carry. The comps should still be good as they are nerfing all the other meta comps, but it will probably not be OP anymore. Heimerdinger is getting a nerf at 2 and 3-star. This is a tiny change, but I haven't really seen Heimerdinger as that great of a carry unless you're playing Yordles. Lysandra is getting nerfed at all levels. With the right opener, this comp is incredibly strong, and she is a fantastic utility unit to shred AD of enemy teams. She is also getting bug fixed, so she shouldn't be casting on worthless targets anymore or get her spell cancelled. The developers said that the intention is to keep Lysandra power neutral, so in theory, you should play her just as much in the same situations as in the last patch. Samira is getting a tiny nerf. This comp was playable and could win games with Samira 3-star, so it's nice to see a small nerf to compensate for all the other comps getting nerfed. Taric is getting nerfed at 1 and 2-star, which is nice. I think the 2-star might be a bit overkill, but 1-star Taric was straight up the best unit in the early game with the insane amount of healing he gives at that point. Moving on to forecasts, Fiora is getting a nice AD buff, a great change to see as this might open her up to becoming the main carry in challengers. In addition, this should make her itemization more flexible as she will deal a lot more AD now as opposed to mostly true damage before. Jhin is getting a small nerf, they're making him cast a bit quicker but nerfing his stats. This shouldn't affect Jhin too much, he should still be a good carry but his ult will be a bit more consistent now. Lux is getting her mana refund nerfed. This makes her more reliant on blue buff, which is fine, but again, she wasn't oppressive last patch, but this is a preemptive nerf since all meta comps are getting hit. Orianna gets a nice buff, she will cast a lot faster and consistently, but she will stun for a shorter time. This should make Sojourn and Rageblade on her great as she should be able to get multiple casts off now. Sion is getting buffed at all levels, which makes him more utility focused, which is nice because I didn't really like the I will just one-shot your entire board now. Urgot gets a nice buff, although it looks tiny, Urgot does nothing without his spell, so it's a nice change to see. Yone is getting a small AD nerf, which is fine. This should make the choice between whether you should go for Fiora or Yone carry more interesting, which I'm really excited about for the next patch. Moving on to 5 costs, Akali is getting buffed at 1-star. This is nice to see as you won't get punished as hard if you don't hit Akali 2-star in Syndicates anymore. The HP buff is also pretty huge since you're getting way more effective HP due to all the tanky stats she gets from Syndicates. Galio gets buffed in every other comp besides Clapio. This is a good change for the game as Galio is a more viable tank now, but a sad change for the Clapio enjoyers out there. Jace is getting nerfed in melee form but buffed in ranged form. I like this change as it makes the decision of whether to make Jace melee or ranged more interesting. Jinx is getting nerfed overall and at 2-star. This makes the capped Chemtech Bruiser board weaker, but I still feel like Jinx is a bit too inconsistent at times to reliably be the main carry. Victor is getting a mana nerf and a small damage nerf. This is fine as Victor with the right items would just one-shot teams, and he should still be a great carry or secondary carry in the next patch. Moving on to items, blue buff gets a nice buff. Now it gives 50 starting mana, but it only gives 20 mana after the cast. This should make this item great on utility units like Janna and Orianna. Getting them to ult quicker can give you a big edge in a lot of fights. Frozen Heart gets a nice buff. This is a lot of attack speed slow, and it will be great in any comps that can tech in assassins. A frontline Frozen Heart is also not bad to counter comps that use melee carries like Yone, Fiora, and Trundle. Ionic Spark gets yet another nerf. I haven't used this item too much, but with a high amount of mana pulls in the late game, it did a little too much damage at that point. Moving on to Augments, a ton of the Ornn items are also getting buffed. So this makes the portable forge yet again more attractive, but the main issue is still that you only get 3 options to pick from whenever you choose that augment. They really need to increase the options you have to 4 or 5, and we know that they can do that since we had 5 options with the Radiant Armory in set 5.5. Duet is getting buffed. Now it also gives 500 HP to the units in both spotlights. I have never picked up this augment as it sucks, but maybe I'll test it out next patch. Innovator Heart can't be offered on stage 1-4, and Innovator Soul can't be offered until stage 4-6. This is a great change as it makes the power curve of Innovators more consistent. I've hit the bear on stage 2 before with just an Innovator Heart, which is just stupid OP. In total, this should make the Innovators less forcible, which is nice to see. Item Grab Bag loses the Reforger, that makes this augment less reliable, but I did pick this up a lot on the last patch whenever it was offered. So I guess it's nice to see that it gets nerfed so the choices between other augments are actually competitive. Spellblade is getting reworked, now it will work like Lichbane from League. After you cast your spell, the next auto attack deals a ton of additional AP. This augment should be great for AP carries with lower mana pools such as TF and Lux. Windfall gets nerfed and buffed. 15 gold early game is still a lot, so it's definitely not bad, but it will be nowhere near as good as it was previously. March of Progress gets buffed and moved to Prismatic. This augment was OP when playing 3-cost reroll on the last patch, and it should still be OP if you're playing 3-cost reroll as you still get the 35% chance at level 8. Pause the video if you want to see the new leveling intervals of the March of Progress rework. Broken Stopwatch gets moved to gold tier. This is fine as the augment was only good in the Jin comp, and a lot of the time it wasn't even worth it since you were only running 2 clockwork. With the buff to 4 and 6 clockwork, it should be more viable now. Cram Session is getting a small buff. This augment was already insanely strong in Academy comps, and now it's even better. Featherweights gets nerfed at all levels. This is nice to see as Featherweights on 1-4 was just a free top 4 last patch. Gold Reserves gets a nice buff. Now you get the full effect at 30 gold instead of at 60 gold. This should make reroll mercenaries more viable as you don't have to sit on 60 gold for the entire game anymore. Knife's Edge gets nerfed, which is fine. It was a really strong augment in multiple comps, so now it will be weaker, but still great to give your melee carries more damage. Stand United gets buffed at all levels. Now it might be something worth building your team around if you get the gold or prismatic one. There are a ton of bug fixes, so pause the video if you want to read through all of them. There are still a decent amount of bugs that did not get fixed, but the most important thing is that the aggro bug was fixed, so now units won't change targets randomly anymore. Now, in order to understand how these changes will affect the meta, we need to look at what the meta was at the end of patch 11.23. No surprise to anyone, Katarina was the strongest comp, followed closely behind by Trundle, Samira, and Arcanists. A lot of the comps had very tanky units, as you would 3-star many of them. This made units like Urgot and Jin struggle to get through them. In addition, a lot of people would get strong in the mid game, as they did hit their 2-cost 2-stars really fast, resulting in less people being able to fast 8, and making rolling at 7 something you would have to do more often. This should slow down the pace of the econ meta, but it also depends on how strong or weak the reroll comps will be, since a lot of things got nerfed. Another thing to note is that a lot of reroll comps made each other stronger. Since a lot of people were taking 2 costs out of the pool, it made it easier for other people to hit their 2-cost 3-stars as well. In other words, the more people playing reroll, the easier it is for other rerollers to hit unless they are contested. Now let's take a look at my tier list so you know what to play tomorrow when it goes live. I want to note here that this is just my prediction. Usually I'm not too far off, but this meta will depend a lot on how tanky the tanks are going to be. Chemtech Urgot will be S tier if there are few tanky units in the meta. Kog'Maw reroll got weaker in the late game, but buffed in the early and mid game. This should make the comp S tier now, as it was already great on the last patch. And a lot of other comps got nerfed, which should make it better overall. Lux didn't get hit hard enough for it to drop down to A tier. Although Vex got her damage nerfed, she should still be a great tank. And Lux can easily pivot into a bodyguard frontline as well if needed. Jin might be S tier as he didn't get nerfed as hard as the other comps, but he will be good if the econ meta is slower paced, and worse if it's faster paced, as he really wants to get to level 8 for those 2-star 4 costs. Syndicates are a bit hard to place as almost every syndicate unit got buffed, as well as the synergy itself got buffed, but this comp sucked last patch and did need a lot of love to be playable on this patch. Tristana reroll should still be great if you have 3 Yordles on stage 2-1. I think this comp fell off last patch due to all the super tanks in the meta, and also the aggro bug really screwed over Tristana. I think it's hard to place Trundle and Katarina reroll. I think that if you're rerolling assassins, you probably run Shaco as the main carry, and then either Talon or Katarina as secondary carries. As for Trundle reroll, I think it depends a lot on how good Chemtech is. Since those 2 comps share a lot of the same units, it will be harder to hit things such as Zac and Vi 3-star, as well as Dr. Mundo 2-star. In addition, Trundle is a great item carrier for Urgot, so a lot of people might run Trundle into Chemtech Urgot. But the most important thing to note is that the developers did not intend to kill off most of these comps, just nerfing them into a balanced and fair state compared to the others. Samira reroll was really strong if you hit Samira early on the last patch. It should still be good, but I think this comp will only be something you go for if you have the all-for-one augment, or if you're able to go for 5 Imperial with an emblem. This comp benefited mostly from all the other 2 and 3 cost units being taken out of the pool, letting you hit Samira quicker. Mutants were completely absent last patch besides Kog'Maw reroll, but that comp didn't even use the mutant trait until after you hit the 3-stars. I think that unless we see some Malzahar buffs or Kaisa buffs, this comp will remain in the B tier, although the Darkstar version of the trait is not bad. Fiora and Yone are a bit hard to place. I didn't feel that Yone was any higher than A tier at best in the last patch, and with him getting nerfed, I don't think he will get any better. However, the Fiora buffs might make the comp a lot better, and she could even be more powerful than Yone now. Last but not least, we have Warwick reroll. This comp completely sucked last patch. I think it is a lot of fun to play, but it loses way too hard to Grievous Wound, so it just lets you burst down the Warwick too quickly. But since all the other comps got nerfed, and this one didn't really get changed that hard, it just got hit with the challenger nerfs, it might be B tier, and maybe A tier if the meta turns out correctly for it. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what video you want me to make next. And if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got over 5,000 other players there who are hungry to climb. And if you want to get coached by me, the information is over on the Discord server as well. So take care and see you in the next video.